have the Ayatollah of fantasy rock and roller with us today, Adam Rank. How you doing, Rank?
They look great in person, and I just can't wait till next year we can pack it full of 25,000.
Hey, Bob, how you doing?
Hey, I'm doing great. I didn't know it was Ball Guys Day. It was being ranked. I mean, how can you lose?
This is the Dynasty Vipers Vipercast.
And welcome to the Dynasty Vipers Vipercast. This is episode 52, and we've got a little afternoon delight for you here, a little noon hour lunch break, a little coffee break, depending on where you are, on which coast you are. And if you're in Arizona, we don't know what time it actually is, but we've got with us Mike, the Hitman Wright, joining us tonight.
I don't think I've ever been described as an afternoon delight, but I'll take it.
I know personally I've been called a lot worse, so.
What is up? We're excited to have you here, and certainly, a lot of interesting things to go through. I do think we are contractually obligated to talk a little bit of football, so I want to ask you about maybe your favorite subject, and that's your Arizona Cardinals. I know Arizona's a place that people like to, once they get kind of past their prime in life, they retire in Arizona. And seems like some of that's maybe going on in free agency too. Does the football team have to follow that trend?
I don't know, but we always have. Like that's always been our go-to move. Or when we were like, "Hey, what, a free agent past their prime? Come on down. We'll give them a whole bunch of money to come down and try and sell some tickets." Hopefully, these guys are not past their prime. I don't think J.J. Watt is. I think J.J. Watt still has plenty left to give. So I was really excited for that. The AJ Green signing, yeah. We'll see on that. At least they didn't give him like a huge amount of money, just a 1-year deal to come in. This wasn't the Emmitt Smith, Edgerrin James, just ruining our team for a running back, an old running back, to give him a bunch of money. So, so far so good, I think, for the Cardinals from free agency. The team is definitely improved. The trade for Rodney Hudson is massive. That's a kind of a fantasy football, like veterans. What a hot sauce, turkeys. What's going on here? A veteran move as a fantasy football player is you don't just follow the skill position players. You follow the offensive line. You see who has improved that area because casual fans aren't paying attention to offensive line. Like they don't know who Rodney Hudson is. They're just like, what? Who's that? But superstar centers, superstar linemen, they change everything for fantasy football.
The big guys, they need love too. I know as a Raiders fan, it absolutely crushed me. I just started shaking my head. I watched us trade Trent Brown. Then I watched us trade Gabe Jackson. Then I watched us trade Rodney Hudson. Then I seen us release Incognito and then sign him back. And I'm sitting here, I'm like, what the hell is going on here? What are you possibly doing here?
So you got that going for you.
Yeah, I'm still in stage 4 of the 7 stages of grief now, trying to figure this whole thing out. But really, it comes down to, like you talk about Arizona there, they got Hudson now, probably number 1 or number 2 amongst all centers in the game. They went out and they got Beachum. They're protecting their asset, which is Kyler Murray at this point. Now surrounding him with, say what you will about AJ Green, he's still a veteran presence. If they could play him in the slot, you got Green, you got Fitzgerald possibly coming back, depending on what that looks like. You bounce it out to the outside. You've got Christian Kirk there. You got Hopkins. You got Andy Isabella, who no one's talking about right now, who was the hot thing last year.
No, we need to stop talking about him. Don't do it.
Correct.
Andy's good, man. What are you talking about? Andy's the man.
I was happy when we drafted him, but year one, when a second-round pick in his rookie year can't get on the field and your team doesn't have wide receivers, that's a massive red flag. I gave him a pass, and then last year he had several opportunities. He needed to, what up, Nate? He needed to step up and Arizona desperately needed him to do so. I don't know if Cliff can't figure out how to use him. I don't know if Isabella just isn't good enough, but I think the ship has sailed on Isabella being productive. He could be a good, gadget player from time to time, and that's because that's how we've used him. I feel like every time Isabella is getting a target or an opportunity, he ran a 9 route and he's kind of open down the field because he's fast, or you give him a jet sweep. That's the extent of the Andy Isabella experience so far.
Well, I hate to do this right now, but I think we've already maxed out our football content for the show.
Sweet.
2 seconds, right?
We made it 5 minutes and 45 seconds. You take the intro in it, we're down to about 5 minutes. We clearly went about 3 minutes over on our football content. I know Calvin's got a very important question he has to ask. It's one of those things he drops every week. Calvin, what do you got for us?
All right, so Hitman, you are either about to enter an arena or go take the mound in the 9th inning or go up to an at-bat and an intro music drops. That's the perfect intro music to introduce you to the fans. What's that song?
So, I mean, it certainly depends on the sport, but like I guess if we're going like Gladiator Arena, at bat, still I've got time, right? I've got time. I can build the drama. So then my go-to would always be Phil Collins, In the Air Tonight. I mean, and then just as soon as the Tom Phil hits, that's when that's when I emerge from a puff of smoke that people have no idea how it got there. And I jump on the stage or wherever I need to be. So that's my song that I would go with.
I could be wrong, but I think that comes in at like 14 minutes into the song where it drops the beat. It's pretty long.
Something like that. That's what I'm saying. I need time. We gotta build that tension.
That's fantastic. I love it. I'll never knock anyone for popping on some Genesis or some Phil Collins as their intro music.
Oh man, I love me some Phil. I love Genesis. I love Gabriel. I love all that stuff.
So obviously, we talk about that, entering the Gladiator Arena, or maybe it's something else, but sports plays an important role for most of us who end up doing something fantasy football related as a hobby or as a career later in life. So what was that for you? Like, did you play sports growing up? Like, how did sports impact your life at an early age?
I hated sports as a kid. I was not into them at all. That mostly could be because I have horrific asthma and allergies, so I think that may have played a part in that. that I think that all the athletics was stupid, but I didn't get into sports until high school age, and honestly, the thing that brought me in was video games. I started playing. We all played NBA Jam and stuff back when I was a kid, but in high school, me and a buddy we got really intense on NCAA football. I don't remember what year it was, but like we're best friends and we would play every day. But this got into the type of rivalry that at the end of that game, we would have to like not talk to each other for about 30 minutes because we were so ridiculously competitive and hated losing, and we would get furious, but we would do it every day. And so I got into that. I started playing more of I don't remember which baseball one it was, but anyway, so just getting into like more simulation, Dynasty, building my team, custom making my player, moving them through their career. So that brought me more into the sports world, and then started watching more intently, I should say.
I almost did it again. I almost started talking with the mute on. I got myself this time. I had the first syllable come out of my mouth. I'm like, wait a second. So kind of touching base on, you just mentioned the arcade kind of getting you in, the NBA Jam, the NCAA video games. You kind of grew up in that early 90s kind of era too. Was an arcade for you before the games? Like, what was your preference? Like going back to the arcade, dropping a few quarters down, or?
I loved it all. My people ask, what was the best Christmas present you ever got? And that's easy for me. When I was a kid and I got a Nintendo Entertainment System when I was, whatever, 8 or 9. But yes, I was a child of the arcade. Every Sunday, so my dad's a pastor, and so we would do church, and then every Sunday we would go to this local pizza joint called Peter Piper Pizza, and they always had the arcades at the pizza place. So every Sunday I would be at the arcade, and then they built a mall right behind my house, right? So the house where I grew up in, my fence was the park, and then the park led to the mall. So and the mall, of course, back in the 90s had an arcade. So every day after school, we would jump my fence, and we would scrounge for quarters. We would go beg anybody at my house for quarters. We'd go dive in the cushions, and then we'd go hit the arcade. So a lot of my upbringing in life was spent in the arcade.
I think most of us, it was like that too. Just that going there with like a sock full of quarters or whatever people had back in the day. Bread bag.
I miss the arcade so much. The social experience of being around people, gaming, put your quarter up, I'm next, waiting in line, jumping on the pinball machines, and then when a new machine would show up, oh brother, like that was it. You would walk in and you'd see it immediately, and you're like, something's different. We got a new machine.
What was your go-to game?
The game I think I spent the most time on, I guess the one I associate with that arcade was Mortal Kombat 3. So that's the one that pops into my head of like where I was old enough to play. Like when I was young, I played a lot of Street Fighter 2, but once I got older, I realized I didn't know how to play when I was a kid. We all just played it. So I was like old enough to understand the concept of fighting games and actual strategy and not just smashing the buttons. So Mortal Kombat 3 for me.
Yeah, I see the NBA Jam in the background there, so I had to make sure we pointed that out. Besides the arcade games,
I'm just like letting the world know, if you play me at NBA Jam, you're gonna lose.
Man, are you like I used to put all my quarters up on top, and that I was like all day. I did the little cheat code to get Jim Jackson. I had the code for that.
Okay.
So I had the cheat codes.
We a buddy of mine, Jake Seeley, he writes for The Athletic. If you're in fantasy football, you probably know who Jake is. But he's an NBA Jam guy too, and somehow along the way, Jake got connected to D'Angelo Williams. Like they did a show together or something. I'm not exactly sure, but D-Well started talking crap about NBA Jam, thinking that he was good. So me and Jake jumped on because the machines got online. so me and Jake we scheduled something. We jumped on. D-Will brought his friend on, and let's just say about 2 minutes into the game, him and his friend hated each other and were blaming each other for the butt whooping that they were receiving.
I know we're supposed to talk football here and talk about your journey, but like I said, we just have this comment here. Gary Payton, Sean Kemp. Were you like a Suns guy though? Did you pull out the Suns, or did you go to the Supersonics on this?
The Suns were great going with the Barkley Marley combo, but my my go-to was Grandmama and Alonzo Mourning.
Yeah,
the old school Charlotte Hornets. That was my team. It still is my team.
You can throw Muggsy Bogues in there too.
Yeah,
I had the starter jacket from Charlotte and everything. Like, I loved that team.
Yes, dude. Those colors, that logo.
Mm-hmm.
Ooh, we got. If you guys want to talk a little football, Kenny Gainwell had his pro day going on. He weighed in at 201. Weighed in at 201. Ran a 4.42.
Ooh.
Okay, that's interesting. He did 21 reps too.
Nice.
Okay.
Goodness.
Okay.
Big fan of Gainwell coming out of Memphis there. He's got a lot of good film. And let's see, Memphis is turning into that new RBU.
Yes,
they've been
are.
kicking guys out. It all kind of goes back to good old D. Will, like you mentioned. See how we tie everything together on this show? Like, we must have the best dumb luck ever. So D. Will started that all off. And then you've got the Gibson coming out. And then you got, I can't remember the other guy they had. Pollard. Tony Pollard came out the year before. And now you've got Gainwell, and then they've got another good back coming up too. So that's not going to stop anytime soon. Do you remember that first fantasy league? Like, was it baseball? Was it football? How did you get
basketball?
It was definitely fantasy basketball.
Yeah, Arizona is sports is tough for the streets in Arizona. We're not often very good, but our first real run for me was the Barkley years. We had Barkley, we had Kevin Johnson. I wasn't a diehard basketball fan at that point, but that was kind of like the first foray into, hey, we have a winning team. This is interesting, helping to get me into sports. And then, like I said, the video games got me in, and then the Steve Nash era in Phoenix. I did not miss a game. I could name everyone on the roster, all the way down the bench. And I started playing fantasy basketball and starting to understand the actual strategy of fantasy and realizing it's not just, I draft all my favorite players. There's things you have to do to win in fantasy football that aren't related to the sport. So basketball was my first shot in fantasy.
Yeah, I love that. That's so in the comments here, my 8-year-old just wants to say hey to you, Mike. He's excited that you're joining us on the show. So
Is that Cal?
Yeah. So
what up, Cal?
Yeah. So I am obviously fantasy sports is a hobby for us, but that is certainly something that a lot of us, like I said, kind of got into at an early age. You mentioned fantasy basketball. Maybe there's other fantasy sports as well. But at some point, you decided a hobby was not good enough for fantasy football and decided to make a move. Was there a moment where that sort of clicked? What was that journey like to start with?
So the moment was, I don't know that there was a snap where everything clicked, but it was so I used to work for Jason at a video game company. Jason was my boss. Andy was my superior, but it was a really awesome job, really laid back, and we always talked fantasy football there. And so things started going a little bit south for them, and I started writing for Fantasy Pros. Fantasy Pros opened up their news desk, as they called it. Essentially, they were trying to compete with RotoWorld of having blurbs, and so I started doing some of that, doing some articles for them, and as the other jobs started to wind down, and we already kind of were doing some podcast stuff, it was, okay, crap, fellas, everyone, we're all gonna go find jobs, real jobs, but you know what would be cool? Let's just do this on the side. If this can turn into a job, that'd be really awesome. It's not going to, so we'll, but at least we'll give it a shot. It's hard to go from making video games and screwing around and playing horse in the office every single day to getting a job at Target. Jason went from the owner of this incredibly successul video game business to my man had to go work at T-Mobile, shelling cell phones out. Wow, that was his side gig while we were working on the podcast, and it was we can't have this. We can't be working at T-Mobile. We were dominating Facebook games and iOS games. We got to figure out something cool. So thankfully, the podcast worked out.
So kind of piggybacking off of that, I heard a rumor from, I won't say his name, but it rhymes with Matt Fitzporus, that you and Andy's son kind of have a connection because you kind of shared a bedroom /office at one point along this whole journey.
Yes, the footballers.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. We kicked his son out of a room, and that's where we set up. And our first couple years, it was 3 dudes in a real small bedroom. Just, that was a funky room, man. That room smelled real bad because it gets hot in Arizona, and so. You have to close. We had to do so much stuff to this room. It was crazy. So when you would close, you'd have to close the door for the recording because you gotta have it quiet. And when you would close the door, the air conditioning wouldn't work in that room because something was going on with the return. So we had to cut a hole in the door, put a vent just so that would work. We put in an extra like AC unit in that room, just one of those just honky tonk, we put it in the window, but we would have to turn it off during recording because it was too loud. So by the time recording ended, our backs are just drenched in sweat, and I mean, it's the good old days now, but it was rough there for a couple years of 3 guys in a 10 by 10 room. We took over the closet. We called it the Clopus. Jason worked in there. It was wild, man.
I could just imagine, like, the kid coming up to his old bedroom. There's like a piece of paper stuck on the door. It's like recording.
Oh, we had a light by the end.
Oh, nice! A light on the bedroom door.
We fed a wire through so we could slap the button on the inside, letting people know the red light was on. Do not come in here. We're recording.
I love that because. Yeah, well, I got the curtain here now. That's kind of my recording thing. Hopefully, it doesn't work. You got as much traffic going on behind me as we do, but I kind of love that whole thing because we talked about Charch earlier. You jumped on with Charch, and he kind of started in his apartment too. That's kind of how they started, or his journey began. Yours began at a tech company that kind of transformed into a bedroom podcast that's now taken on to. We bring Charch back in. You guys went on tour, and he introduced you guys to a live audience in Minnesota. Yes. Like, you guys took your show on the road, which is something you don't see. Just kind of talk about this whole journey, tying in with Calvin's question. The footballers going from bedroom office to where you are now.
Yeah, man, the ride has been crazy. Just very, very thankful. Every day, Nate, is Jason's percentage of smell. Yes. Probably look at it was 33%. We all smelled real bad. But so a funny thing about the bedroom, I mean, we did it up nice, like we put up our fake brick wallpaper and we had it framed real nice for the YouTube, and eventually the gaining traction, and we would hear from people like, "Hey man, I'm traveling through Phoenix. Really love to come check out the studio and say hi." And we're like, "Yeah, we're busy. you can't because it's Andy's kid's bedroom. Like, there's nothing to see." And it just taking the time of when we finally could, as a business financially be stable enough to get that office, man, that was a huge moment where we're not all just sitting on each other's laps anymore. We actually have a proper workplace. We have a real studio. I mean, it's a converted warehouse, but an actual studio. We have a lobby where we can watch all the football games and everything. It's one of the. We really try not to overlook or just take advantage of where we are. So being very grateful every single day that we talk about football. That's my job. I jumped on one of our writers, Casey Kasem. She does a podcast where she kind of does behind the scenes with fantasy football people. I jumped on that yesterday, and she, she was having a rough day, right? Rough day at work, and so thankfully we got her in a better mood by the end of the podcast. And I was thinking, I'm like, man, it is really nice to. I don't have those. Like, that's a huge blessing. I've rough times at home with 3 kids, but I don't ever leave work. I'm like, you're like, you want to punch your boss in the face. I doubt, because that would be me wanting to punch myself in the face. But it is so awesome to not have. There's no bad days at work. There are days where you're like, you have to do stuff you don't want to. You got to go grind stat projections for every single team and every player, and that's not necessarily my favorite thing in the world. But I never leave work angry. Where, I mean, that's unfortunately that's the story for a lot of people when they leave their job.
Yeah, can you give us some of your favorite interviews from that time when you were in that bedroom?
So let's see. So the favorite interview from it's okay. So in the bedroom, somehow we got connected to a person who will remain nameless, but they worked for a larger network, and they became a fan of our show, and they were able to help us book football players to interview, which was absolute insanity. And we loved, especially me, we loved Martavis Bryant, right? He was coming on for the Steelers. He was going to be a huge deal. And I think he was the first player we ever interviewed. And I over prepped, man. I had 30 minutes worth of questions because I didn't want to mess anything up. Like, this is a once in a lifetime shot. It's incredible. Martavis is going to be on. We jump on the phone with Martavis Bryant. He's not a talkative fella. So we burn through 30 minutes worth of questions in about 5 minutes. And we're like, oh, this is a struggle. And what should have tipped us off to what was coming, the little foreshadowing, we sat out and said, hey, okay, Martavis, who is the toughest DB that you've had to play against, your rookie year? And he said, oh, it was I forget the guy's number. He's like, whatever, number 29 on the Kansas City Colts. And then we're all like, what just happened? So we actually edited that part out for his sake for the pod. We just had to say Kansas City. So we're like, guys, that was really bizarre. It's really cool. We're talking to Martavis Bryant. And so we get that done. We put that in the show. The show goes live the next day. We're all celebrating. We go out to eat. We go out and we all sit down. And this is a place that has TVs on. I'm not joking. The second we sit down and they got sports on, breaking news: Martavis Bryant suspended. And our show interviewing him had just gone live that morning. And we're like, are you freaking kidding me? And it was and he got busted for pot. And it was like, okay.
Makes sense now.
Some things are starting to make sense now. Like, he didn't have the clearest head when we were doing the interview. But just that series of events was really, really funny. He's on the show, instantly suspended.
Mike, you talk about doing homework for that interview. Have you ever watched a cartoon from 1995 in preparation for an interview?
I can't say that I have.
I spent last night watching the Goofy movie.
Oh, I mean, look, if the fact that you had to watch it are you telling me you had not seen the Goofy movie? I have now.
Now.
You have now? All right. So you're in now. You understand why it's the greatest cartoon movie ever made.
So are you watching that movie because of your kids, or is that something that you took from your childhood?
Oh, it's my kids are like, the Goofy movie again? Because when his dad's turn to pick the movie, there's about a 50% chance a Goofy movie's gonna be on there.
That's funny. So with Goofy, here's my question. Goofy is like a man dog, right? Dog
that's
man.
Right. Yeah,
and
he's
Pluto
a dog.
Is a traditional dog.
Yes.
How does that work?
Well, I mean, Goofy's, he's anthropomorphic, something like that. I mean,
we'll take it.
I don't know what Walt Disney was thinking, man. Like, he made a mouse a person, and that mouse still needed to have man's best friend, mouse's best friend. I don't know. So Pluto's a real dog, and Goofy is a human dog. There's memes about it. So the funnier part is, it's the whole story is it's a father-son story, Goofy movie, but then you got to take a step back and you go, wait, Goofy has a child. That means that at some point someone was familiar with Goofy, and you're like, that's how what? You're like, who did that?
Yeah.
With
I'm gonna
Goofy?
leave it alone. I had an inappropriate joke, but I'm gonna leave it alone.
We're all
Back to you,
thinking it.
Matt.
So, changing subject somehow from that. Let's just say, the fantasy football bug never bites you. You guys never ultimately decide you're gonna do that. What would your hobbies look like? Like, what would you be spending your time doing?
Oh man, hobbies? I mean, I don't got time for hobbies with the kids. I mean, I wish I had time for video games. I still tell myself I have time because I buy them all, and then I never play them. Like, I have Cyberpunk sitting on my PlayStation. I've never played it, but I was looking forward to that game for years. I still have never played it. So that would be my number one hobby. Get back in the games.
You recently just got into Dungeons and Dragons too, as I think
Yes,
you're pretty
I
new
guess
to this
that
as well.
is my one hobby. I played last night.
Okay, so explain, like, put me through D&D 101, like Dungeons and Dragons for Dummies here, because I thought I was being clever and trying to show them how smart I was, talking about this flute on one of your tweets, and then you're like, no, it's a lute. I'm like, what? That doesn't even make sense. Why is a dwarf halfling have a loot? Isn't loot like money? Why am I beating someone with money? It doesn't make sense to me. So,
well, a loot, L-U-T-E. I think so. Yeah, Canadians, you guys have the loot is a form of money, right?
yeah.
Yeah. So a loot is it's like a really old school guitar. Essentially, if you think medieval England, it's where like the head of the guitar is like bent 90 degrees. It's a weird looking guitar, but so if you want the 101 D&D, it's imagine when you were a kid and you played imagination games just out in the yard, and you would just say, hey, I'm this guy and you're this guy, and you have nothing. You're just imagining. That's really what Dungeons and Dragons is, with a little bit with rules. And instead of you saying, oh, I hit you, I killed you, and then you're arguing, no, you didn't hit me. No, but I got you. No, you didn't get me. You roll dice to see if you actually did hit somebody or anything like that, and and then you play under the confines of what your character is allowed to do and what spells you have. But it really is, it's just a big game of make believe, which man, it is for dorks. It is for nerds, and it is so much freaking fun.
So, forgive my ignorance here.
I'm new to it too, man.
Would you consider going to one of these Dungeons and Dragons role-playing events that they have out there, like dress up as a drow or something, and show up and practice your like? I've seen it on TV. The LARPs, yes, LARPs.
The live action role. I don't know if I'm there yet. I definitely want to. We're all my group is we're spread around the country. I would love to play actually in person with them. It's like for people who don't get it, like it's just a different version of a poker night. It's like where you're hanging out with the dudes, you're having some drinks, you're just screwing around, having a good time. We're just playing a different game. It's like that's what boils it down of just you're hanging out essentially, and but you're hanging out pretending that I'm a half elf bard. I mean, at some point, maybe my nerddom gets to the point where I'm going to be down with the LARP, but I could say I understand it now. Where when I had never played anything like this, you're watching. Oh, what was the movie? Oh, Sean William Scott and Paul Rudd.
Yes, where they had the kid. They break.
Yeah, I can't remember the name of it right now. But the kid they were watching was into LARP. You're like, oh man, look how hilarious and nerdy this is. And now I'm like, well, okay, I gotta see what they were doing. I see why they're into this.
So if you obviously weren't into fantasy football, that never came up, and you weren't out LARPing, I got a quick video here. Would you? I'm gonna play this video, but I'm gonna ask you this first before we go to the video. Would you consider taking up fishing? And before you answer that,
cast. My dad taught it to me when I was about your age. Okay, now, watch carefully. You gotta be loose, relaxed, with your feet apart, and 10 o'clock, 2 o'clock, quarter to 3, tours you pay, twist, over, pot of do, I'm a little teapot, and the wind up. Huh? And let her fly!
And then Bigfoot shows up.
So I know me personally, I can answer this part of the question, but have you shown your 3 kids the perfect cast yet?
Not in physical form. I am not a fisherman. My strongest memory of fishing is, so we have it's called Lake Pleasant. Right, it's not that far from where we are, like a 30-minute drive or something. And my cousins who I grew up with, they were into fishing. And I'm like, okay, I'll go with you. And we go fishing. And I didn't properly understand how to cast. I had not seen the Goofy movie yet. That's how young I was. I didn't understand the perfect cast. So my cast ended up being me chucking the fishing pole into the lake. And we had to figure out how to get it out. So that's how good I am at fishing.
Nice.
As a father of many children that we've gone fishing, that has happened more times than I can count right now.
Oh, good. I'm glad it's not just me.
It wasn't just you, no. So you say you take up fishing, and Bob, I'm going to let you kind of take this next part here because I know you're a big fan of this as well as I am. If you're going out fishing,
yeah, really.
Let Bob talk.
Come on,
Let
Bob.
Bob cook.
I got nothing.
Bob, I know you know what this is. So if we're going fishing, what's that one snack you're packing with you?
Oh, see, that's why they brought me. So
the Snack King?
I don't catch every Footballers episode, but I do catch every Spitballers episode.
Okay.
So I'm here about the food takes, and I had to run to the store this morning because I ran out of honey. And the one snack that I would bring is the peanut butter and honey sandwich.
Oh,
I only tried that after hearing you mention that on the podcast, and it is absolutely amazing.
Wow! So you went your whole life never having the peanut butter and honey, and now you're like, now it's a snack.
It's a constant.
It's the best. Look, peanut butter jelly is fine. I don't need to knock peanut butter and jelly to talk about the greatness of peanut butter and honey, but the quarantine life, man, my peanut butter and honey count went way up.
Oh yeah.
I was eating those things nonstop.
Working from home, they're very easy to put down 2 or 3.
Yes.
And it's cheap. It's a nice cheap source, and you get all your vitamins and everything you need in one sandwich, which is fantastic.
Seem like you're changing lives. You don't even know it. You're changing lives.
I'm feeling like a proud father right now.
That's right. And we all kind of have those people that help us out and help us learn, great things like that. And I'm certain that you and the rest of the fantasy footballers have had that along the way as well. So who are some of those? I know Paul Charchian, because obviously, you jumped on that show, but who else would you say has been like a big part of mentoring you guys or helping you guys along the way?
So, man, I would say the biggest influence, at least I can say, is was the CBS guys. So Jamie, Dave, Adam. I think Adam was our first interview ever for the podcast, but the tech job, the video game job, that was a 40-minute one-way commute for me and for Andy. Like it was every day was the grind of drive, and the drive home was in rush hour, so that sometimes went over to an hour. So the fantasy football content we consumed was the CBS podcast, and I mean at the time there wasn't a lot of fantasy football podcasts. The market was not like it is right now. If you're just getting into the game of looking for fantasy football content on podcasts, congratulations to you, because there is not a lack of shows out there. But when we were listening, it was ESPN, CBS, Football Guys had a show, and there was a couple like other independent shows. But CBS was my favorite. I thought they knew what they were talking about. The production on it was pretty solid. So that was kind of, it was like, well, they were the ones who have like, we can do that, So I would say that we didn't really have a mentor, so to speak, but if of influences, CBS, those guys would have been the biggest.
Yeah, I've had the pleasure of kind of talking with Heath here with CBS here more recently than not, and those guys, they're fantastic. And we talk about these relationships, like Calvin mentioned, throughout the getting you guys going and stuff. But outside of the actual fantasy, and I know Jason and Andy play a huge role in this too, who are some of those guys maybe in that fantasy industry that you kind of bounce real life questions off of?
Yeah, I mean, I mostly just go to those guys. But okay, so I'll say the person that changed fantasy football the most for me, just the way I think about it, was JJ. So I came across JJ Zacharysen's late round quarterback manifesto, PDF, whatever you want to call this, like forever ago, and it was all about you're drafting quarterbacks too early. And when I was playing, I didn't realize this. You were like, quarterback's the most important position in football. I have to get the best quarterback. That's the only way I'm going to win. And reading an actual strategy piece on how that is not optimal and you can wait, it was like, holy crap, man, this is wild. And I took that, because you don't share your information. You don't tell people your secrets for fantasy football.
Never.
So I take that information in. This is before we had started the podcast. And I go to the draft. And it's like the end of the draft, and I still don't have a quarterback. And the other guys in the league they're not hip to late round quarterbacks, the strategy yet. And it turns into this like huge ordeal because people were like, Mike still doesn't have a quarterback. It got to the point where people started taking like their second and third quarterback because they thinking they're hilarious of they're going to stop me from having a quarterback and just my season will be over. I'll be tanked. I'm like, okay, guys, you go ahead, keep doing that. And I think I drafted Roethlisberger just because I'm like, whatever, it doesn't matter. And then after the draft, before week one even takes place, I drop Roethlisberger. I pick up Carson Palmer because he's playing the Chargers in week one. And I won that week specifically because of that move. Palmer outscored Ben by a handful of points, and I only won by a handful of points. So it was just, and then I won the league that year. So it was just this really sweet victory, and that also then changed things for the rest of the league. They're like, wait a minute, how did Mike do this? How did he win not having a quarterback?
Nice.
So from QB chicken to streaming a QB to league champion is kind of how that rolled out.
Mm-hmm.
You got to love it when it works out that way. It doesn't usually work out for me that way, but it works.
It doesn't always. I mean, only one person gets to win per year.
Absolutely. So speaking of the year, big year for the footballers coming up. like every year. You guys continue to go bigger and better with everything you're going with the podcast, the live tours. Obviously, COVID probably slowed things down last year a little bit. What do you guys got in store? What are you guys planning on for 2021?
So 2021, we're still not going to be hitting the road yet. We're going to let all that get figured out. Get vaccinated, people. Wear your masks. Stay safe. Let's take care of each other. So hopefully that in 2022, we can be back out there on the road. But so we've put the focus this year of we have our Ultimate Draft Kit. That's our premium draft product, and we took it up this year with we have the UDK Plus. That was our biggest thing, which is so now we're in the Dynasty world. We have, because the UDK Plus has the Dynasty Pass. It's got the DFS. It's got you covered for a year-round thing, and we're putting a draft analyzer in there because you know we all like to get the pat on the butt after you draft your team. I'm like, I need someone to tell me if this team is good or bad. Guilty. I still need that. Like, I remember early on in the career, I think the football guys had this tool where right after your draft, I would run to that website, input all my players, and it would say, okay, hey, you did good or you did bad. So we're getting one of those hooked up into the UDK. But so that's the focus this year, is just improve the product, try to expand the reach of the podcast, hopefully get some more listeners in.
That's pretty impressive, because I know I've watched the footballers kind of come out of nowhere. It seems for the people viewing, it was all of a sudden like you guys just shot right up there, and I think
that's fair. We came out of nowhere.
I think the misconception is I think people trying to get into this think that that's going to happen for them.
Mm-hmm.
And you've talked about the market being kind of saturated now. Before you guys got into the market, that wasn't necessarily the case. You know, there wasn't as many podcasts as there is now. And I think a misconception out there for individuals trying to get in is, I'm going to go out there, I'm going to work for a month or two, I'm going to put my grind together, and I'm going to be a full-time employee. That doesn't happen. It just doesn't. You guys put a lot of work into what you did to get to where you did. Like, we're talking stinky bedrooms here with ventilation going on. Like, you guys grinded to put in there, and you still do to this day.
Yes, I will say the right place, right time for us. Where when we started the podcast, it was, or like when we went for it, to really make this a thing. Number one, we ran a business, and we would have business plannings. What do we want the show to be? The podcast is the most important thing, but Jason ran a business. Andy was a key man in running that business, so they had that background. It wasn't just, hey, let's make a show and hope people listen to it. It was, no, like, you need to have a business strategy behind this show. So we had that stuff going. Then really right place, right time of the fantasy football podcast market was not saturated yet, and podcasts in general, kind of right when we were getting in, hit the turbo button. Apple had just added, we lost Calvin. See you later, dude. Apple had just recently, or I can't remember the timeline, but the podcast app on an iPhone, that didn't exist. Podcasts were just part of the iTunes store, and then Apple said, no, we're going to feature podcasts and make it a standalone app. It's installed on every phone, so as soon as you get it right there in the front, more people are getting exposed to the idea of what is a podcast. So right time, right place, but also having the plan for it. That situation, should the right time, right place appear, we will be ready for it.
Yeah, so for those of us trying to make it in this fantasy football, like, atmosphere, stratosphere, give us your fatherly advice, your best advice for us trying to make it in this game here.
So, man, it's number one, it's tough, and you have to be willing to commit and know that it's still it's a long shot to really turn this into a full-time thing. It's wild how big fantasy football is, but the amount of actual full-time positions it's very small. But so my advice for getting in is, I mean, number one, find your medium. I am not a writer. I mean, I can write, but I don't enjoy it. It's not
Same here.
It's not my go-to. I am an audio person. My background of being a musician, being a front man, so I'm fine talking into a microphone. And even with that, even having some experience, you're gonna suck. when you start, you're gonna suck. We go back, if you listen to our first episode, oh man, it gives me physical pain listening to myself of how bad it is. I'll go back 2 years when the podcast is already very successful, and I'll hear myself from 2 years ago go, oh man, that guy sucks. He's so bad. So always be improving. You have to, you're like, where do I start? You just start. That is the answer. You sit down, you start taking reps, because that's the only way to improve. Don't just wait for your magical moment. Get out there, put the work in, get better, and listen to yourself. Listen back. You know, it might hurt. Some of the people don't like the sound of their own voices. I get that. I hate the sound of my voice. I'm like, who is that nasally man with the really high-pitched, annoying laugh? You're like, oh, wait, that's me. Oh, crap. So record your show, listen back, figure out where you can improve, figure out what listen to the people that you admire. So how are they doing it? You know, what are they doing differently than you? And that you feel like makes them sound more polished than you. But just knowing you have to get the reps in. Talking into a microphone is weird when you first get started. So that's my biggest piece of advice is you need to practice, man.
Awesome. Thank you.
I love that, because I went back, and one of our more popular videos on our YouTube is an interview with Marcus Grant. And I think it was like episode 9. So it's one of the very first ones. And I sucked. Like, I'm not good. I'm still not good by any stretch of anyone's, but I was really bad. Like it almost like, well, Mr. Grant, what, you know, it was just like, I was tripping, timid. I was stuttering. Yeah. I was all over the place, even more so than I am now. But then I realized that's just how I normally speak. But you're right.
But the fact that you can go listen to that and recognize, like, okay, here are weaknesses that I need to improve on.
Right.
That's what you need to be doing. You need to be getting better, and the way to get better is hear yourself be bad and realize and pick out the things. Okay, this is why this was bad.
And I agree with that 100%. I just started a podcast with John Bosch, and I go back and I edit the podcast, and I can't imagine how many times I can't believe how many times I say and I mean it, and you're going back and you're listening to it, and you could just cut out half of the tape.
Sure, we don't.
You're good. You're good.
Leave it all in.
I was saying we still have our stuttering. We still have our filler words, so to speak, where when we don't know what to say, or our transition words. Mine is look. Like that's my go-to. Look. And I can't stop myself from saying it, but we don't have time to edit it. We have so much content that we just have to get out immediately.
Right.
That people ask, okay, well, you know, how many times do you guys mess up? Or when we mess up, that's great. That's better for our show, because also, if I mess up, they're going to torch me. If Jason messes up, I'm going to destroy him and point out to everybody how Jason just messed up so terribly. And when it's done, that's it, man. We don't edit anything.
That's my favorite part of the show, is you guys ragging on each other. That's the best part. It's the best part.
Right.
So did you ever figure out who number 29 was?
The number I was just throwing out a number.
It's got to be Eric Berry.
No, it would. because it was he was on the Colts. Now his name is escaping me. He was an elite DB. He was on the Colts for a while. I think then he went to the Dolphins. Oh, I can't think of who it was.
Was it the guy that retired at halftime? For the Bills?
It might have been him. What was his name? Yeah, I can't think of his name right now.
Yeah. Bob, this is why you're in the chat. Usually you have like all this information.
Usually I get
already.
The stats. Yeah.
Look.
Yeah.
Come on, Bob. Come on. But yeah, no, I love it. Like I said, for me personally, I love doing the live show because you get all that ragging in there. You can kind of criticize Vontae
Davis.
Yes, I think it might have been.
You get all that good stuff.
Yeah. I beat you, Ryan.
Ryan coming through.
You get all that good stuff going on, and plus editing sucks. Like I tried when we started doing our podcast, I tried to edit all the long pauses in between and all the A's. And by the way, I say A lot apparently. So editing all that out. Right? A 1 hour or 2 hour podcast was like 3 or 4 hours worth of editing. I'm like, no, man, that ain't it.
Yeah, I don't got time for that.
So we got one last thing here, Mike. We're hitting that 1 hour. I want to be respectful of your time here. Kind of let the people know where they can find you. And obviously, most people watching the show know exactly who you are and what you're doing, but let them know again. Let them hear it.
Sure. On Twitter and Instagram, I am at FFHitman, and thefantasyfootballers.com. That's our hub for everything. Like our rankings are there. If you want the ultimate draft kit, it's there. If you're not sure how to find a podcast or find our YouTube, just thefantasyfootballers.com.
And then one last question, because you guys have had a lot of good writers come through the footballers and move on to bigger and better things. Is there a writer out there that was absolutely so bad you were actually glad they were gone? Like maybe Nate Hamilton or something like that? Or was there a good writer out there?
Oh man, nothing but love for everybody who has written for us in the past.
This guy's good.
Currently writing for us. Like our team is good. It was I actually talked about this a lot on Casey's podcast because it's just the question of writers came up, and she's because Casey writes for us, and I was expressing to her the first thing we look for, now I remember how it came up. She was saying when you guys call out for writers, you don't post it anywhere. You just mention it once on the show. And we leave it open for a couple days, and then we close the applications. He said, well, why do you do that? And I said, because we want, number one, if you're going to be a writer for our team, we want you to know the show. We want you to be an involved listener who understands our brand, understands who we are, understands how we present ourselves, the things that we don't say, right? Like they're who we are as people. So that's why we do it that way, where we just put it on the show. And if you missed that show, sorry, you probably missed your chance to apply. And we get the applications in, and so then we start looking at people's Twitter feeds, and that's what we do first. I don't vet your work first. I vet you as a person. Are you a cool person? Are you somebody when? Because as soon as we accept you as a writer, I know that you're going to be out saying, hey, on Twitter, like, I have news. I'm going to write for the footballers. It's now in your Twitter bio. I write for the fantasy footballers. So I want to make sure that you as a person are cool. Like you're not just being a jerk out there on Twitter. So that's I guess another piece of advice is don't be a jerk, man. Just be cool. Twitter can be a good place. It doesn't have to be us all burning each other down to the ground, arguing over stupid crap, insulting people. Like, we can have healthy debate. We can disagree, but just be cool. So I guess that was going back to your question of, I got on this tangent of the first thing we check is to make sure that we are going to have good people on the team. So if you've been on the team, good people. And that does regrettably include Nate.
Yeah, I just had to throw Nate out there because I seen him in the chat room. I know he was with you guys there a while. Love Nate. Absolutely love Nate. But I just had to throw that out there.
No, he's good people. I have hung out with Nate in the physical person, like not just virtual. So Nate's a good dude.
Nice.
Major, you got anything before we close out?
No, man, this is amazing, dude. Big fan. Where did you get the name the Hitman from? Though, is that from Brett? Is that from Brett the Hitman?
No, but I do love. But Brett the Hitman Hart he's my second favorite wrestler behind Shawn Michaels. Love Bret Hart. No, the origin of my nickname is such a bad story that it's now a good story.
Nice.
So, we were one of the things we were thinking about for when we were going through names. Funny enough, before we landed on the fantasy footballers, is it like I said, business stuff. Andy is a smart guy, and it was we're not going to take a name unless we can get the URL, right? And it was we knew we could. So the fantasy footballers, that was one of the names. I'm like, okay, we ended up going with that one, but the fantasy hitman was a name that I had floated out of. It's like, that's kind of cool, Hitman, it's dangerous. But anyway, so we start the show, and at this time the show is just myself and Andy, and no one is listening. Nobody. But there was a week that Andy was going to be out of town. We were just doing one show a week, and it was I can't let this momentum die. I'll let down our 2 listeners if we don't put a podcast out this week. So I brought in someone else from the office who was in our he's in our league, and so the show really just turned into it was just me talking, and him not really contributing very much to the podcast. But I kept going to the joke of Andy's not here to stop me from doing anything. So I legit just dubbed myself. I'm like, you know what? Call me the fantasy hitman. Like that's is the name I will be going by because Andy cannot stop me. So it just turned into a running joke where Andy came back and he would say, hey, here we are. I'm Andy Holloway, Mike Wright. I'm like, that's Mike the fantasy hitman, right? And he was like, it just bothered him so much that of course it bothers him. So now I'm going to keep leaning into that. Anytime he calls me Mike Wright, I will correct him. No, that is Mike the fantasy hitman, right? And it was one of those things where I just spoke it into existence and just kept the joke running so much that the name stuck.
Nice.
So what you're saying is George Costanza really should have been listening to you if he wanted to keep that T-Bone moniker that he was pushing.
T-Bone?
So we tie everything up here. It's a weird show how this all works out.
That's fine, man. We're having fun.
So with that, we got to close her out here. I got to get back to work, back to the office here. So for Major, for Bob, for Mike, the fantasy hitman, right?
That's right.
This is the Dynasty Vipers Vipercast, and we're gone.